Shane's juggling jobs here, as I pointed out. So, what was your sense? I mean, were any of the questions from the traditional liberals on the court, Breyer, Sotomayor, Kagan, Ginsburg, any of their questions indicate that they may be thinking about blowing up the Voting Rights Act?
Not at all, no.
Or the opposite, that they're going to vote strongly to sustain it?
They're going to vote strong. I mean, this is just a prediction, but I will say it's going to be your classic 5-4, Kennedy being the swing vote.
Did Kennedy say anything today?
He did. He asked a lot about equal footing, and he also asked often about, there's two sections where you can challenge new voting laws. One is 5, which means that is Section 5 where you do it ahead of time. Section 2 is after the law's gone into effect, you can sue. Mm-hmm. He asked, can we get rid of 5? Won't 2 be good enough and you can just get an injunction? In other words, the court will stop the enforcement of the new voting law until this is litigated, your complaint.
Right.
So Kennedy, to me, I think seems leaning towards saying, let's get rid of 5. You have enough redress under Section 2. So that would be my prediction. Justice Breyer really gave some great arguments, essentially saying, this institutional racism, it's kind of like a disease. And while we fix remedies for this disease and it kind of goes into remission, it also morphs and it adapts. And he finally just said, Alabama still has this disease.
Right.
And he said point blank.
Right.
So I would say he's going to uphold it. Sotomayor and Kagan said, I think Sotomayor was the one who said, Alabama is the epitome of why this act is required. Kagan was talking about how cases like this are four times more likely in the states covered by Section 5. So that's evidence right there that Congress's formula for establishing Section 5 works.
Right.
So
what all of this is demonstrating is, in my mind, is that we no longer have a constitutionally limited representative democratic republic here in the United States. We have a constitutional monarchy. In a constitutional monarchy, you have a monarch who can blow up the laws passed by Congress, by Parliament, by whatever it may be, and can even make new laws if they like. Basically, arguably can throw people out, can call for elections. I don't see that the Supreme Court has done that, but although you could argue that Dred Scott certainly blew things up, leading right to the Civil War, but it wasn't a direct, that was sort of more like cause and effect. But that what we have here is a constitutional monarchy where the monarchs are the 9 people on the Supreme Court. I mean, why are these 9 people even debating whether this law is needed? How is that not the job of Congress? Shane?
I agree with you, and if the populace doesn't like this law, you vote in people who will repeal the law.
Right.
That's the process that it should go through.
Right. I mean, John McCain voted against the Martin Luther King holiday. I mean, it's not like voting against things that African Americans like is going to guarantee that you're not going to get reelected to the Senate. If the Voting Rights Act is a bad piece of legislation, just because Scalia thinks it's a favorite piece of African Americans doesn't mean that come on, that is the weakest, lamest, weirdest, sickest argument I think I've ever heard.
But you need to remember, and I know you do remember this, Tom. The GOP, their party platform for many elections, has had amongst its planks to overturn the Voting Rights Act. This is a conservative Republican.
Yeah.
This is one of their goals, and that's why they're pursuing this. And I know that Scalia claims this court isn't political, but
no, this court is purely political. It's 5-4 political. It's under the control of the Republicans. It's been dancing to a Republican tune and agenda for the better part of a couple of decades now. Largely ever since Earl Warren died. And who intervened between? Was there somebody between Earl Warren and Rehnquist? I don't think so. I think it went right to Rehnquist, didn't it? That was during the Nixon administration. And whenever it was. In any case, it's just, we've got this right-wing court. This is just totally bizarre. So, and the effect of this is going to be that we're going to go back to 1964. And, if you're not old enough to remember 1964, and I'll confess, I was only 13 at the time, but there were still places in America where there were whites-only signs in 1964. In fact, there were a lot of them. And we had them in Michigan. And I don't understand why the Voting Rights Act has not been extended to all 50 states. And I think if we had a decent Supreme Court, well, again, I don't think the Supreme Court should be making law. I think if we had decent Congress, that it would be expanded. But and I don't know why the Voting Rights Act hasn't been used. Well, I guess arguably it has been used to stop these American Legislative Exchange Council bills, these ALEC bills, these voter suppression ID laws. It's like, there's no voter fraud. Come on, more people die from televisions falling on their head than are prosecuted for voting fraud every year in the United States. It is a complete shill, a complete canard. George W. Bush spent 7 out of his 8 years, over $70 million, had 93 federal prosecutors looking for people who were committing voting fraud to set up the passage of this ALEC Koch brothers funded legislation that would, since a quarter of the African Americans in the United States don't have ID that would allow them to vote, and 18% of college students don't have ID that would allow them to vote under these voting laws, that would basically kick those people out of contention. Almost 20% of Latinos. Same thing. I mean, if you're poor, you don't own a car, what do you need a driver's license for? It's pretty straightforward stuff. And this has been a strategy of the Republican Party since the 1980s. They've very carefully spent the last 20 years or so trying to convince Americans that there's this epidemic of voting fraud. There isn't. When James O'Keefe went into Acorn and said, dressed like a pimp and the whole thing, and we're gonna do this, that, and the other thing, Acorn turned him in. I mean, that didn't stop Fox News from lying about it. There's an incredible lie machine out there, and there's a bunch of stupid suckers who believe this stuff. I'll bet one calls into the program.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 866-987-THOM.
But time will tell. 27 minutes past the hour. We'll be back.